year is 2030. Yazeed still has not played Doom Eternal. Joseph has just lapped him for the 16th time. He's starting on the 9th iteration of the home games dashboard. We still haven't launched.
That part's true though. We'll be on like, you've done more than 4 in the last 2 years.
Dashboard iterations? Yeah, probably 4. But this one is the last one before launch, I promise.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that stuff in a little bit.
So we do the math, right? 2030 is 8 years away, 2 per year. You should be about 16 dashboard rights.
If I redesign this thing one more time before we get anybody making a game for it, just beat me up. I give you permission to beat me up.
I couldn't beat you up if I tried. I'm wearing a T-shirt from a Disney TV show. I can't beat anyone up.
I don't know, man. There's a Disney people sometimes go crazy on you, you know? I saw a guy wearing Red Octobers in Disneyland a few years ago. Red Octobers are like the $5,000 Kanye Nikes, and I bet that dude hurts people because you don't wear Red Octobers and not hurt people. Anyway, last time we talked, we were talking about some of the catalog stuff that I was working on, some of the new APIs involved around that, the dashboard redesign that I'm kind of working on, again, the final one before launch in July. We have this whiteboard behind us, if you're watching this on video, which has a madman's scribblings of everything that I want to do before July. So yeah, we'll kind of follow up on some of that stuff. Also, beat the shit out of Doom Eternal, and Yazeed has not started it. I looked at your stats after I finished it, and you had 0 playtime in 2 weeks.
I didn't even open Doom Eternal yet. Bro, life gets in the way sometimes.
Oh,
all right?
I know.
But I will say, you did beat me fair and square, and you annihilated it. You beat it in like 9 hours.
I did. It's pretty weird. I enjoyed it a lot more this time around as well, playing it on a harder difficulty.
You enjoyed it more because you knew you'd beat me.
Yeah, I'm a very goal-oriented person. So I finished my job every day and then kind of had time set aside just to play Doom. And I was like skipping everything optional. It would give me like a menu, anything that was enjoyable, like take your time with it. I was just skipping through it, just trying to go. So I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. It took me, I think, like 10 or 11 hours in total. Sorry, I'm also maybe talking weird because we have a new mic set up, and I hear myself like 1 second ago in my ears. So apologies if I'm a little clunky with my speech.
Yeah, it's taking a little bit to get used to. Yeah, if I beat Doom Eternal at any point, will you stop ragging on me about it?
No, because I still beat it twice before you beat it once. And if you beat it at all, I'll beat it 2 times more just to say fuck you, and we'll keep it running.
A 4-to-1 ratio.
Mm-hmm. That's a pretty solid number to keep. Yeah.
See, but you should be careful because that means that if I beat it twice, you have to beat it 8 times. You have to literally beat it 4 more times.
Yeah, but see, I think the thing that you're forgetting is that you cannot beat Doom Eternal.
I have a mental block about beating that game. I know what's gonna happen is I'm gonna play and then I'm gonna get to the dude with the axe and then I'm gonna be like frustrated that I couldn't kill him easily and then be sad and play again, which is exactly what happened last time. Yeah,
the Marauder is probably the hardest part of that game. Playing on hard though, it kind of forces you to get good at the mechanics. When I was playing on normal before, I kind of just brute forced it, and I remember just being so frustrated on some particular checkpoints that I kind of breezed by this time. And it's just because like your flamethrower, your ice thing, your grenades, like all that shit are so important, and that's why it's in the middle of your HUD all the time. Like the game constantly reminds you that those things are there, so you have to use them. And the first time around, I was just ignoring them because, I thought you can just kind of shotgun your way through everything, which you can. It's frustrating that way. But anyway, Doom Eternal, I gained an appreciation for it. I love beating you at anything, so really had a good time with that.
Well, All right. I picked this game, so you'll get to pick the next game.
Elden Ring.
I'm not playing Elden Ring. I'm not going to play it, so touch my butt.
Yeah, like the first week that game came out, I saw someone spent like 92 hours beating it, and I was just shocked. Like, how the fuck did you spend that much time in 1 week as an adult just doing anything?
Yeah.
I'm like 8 hours into Elden Ring. Anyway, video games, we play them, but we also make them.
We do.
Or one day we will.
Yeah. No. We make a thing that can allow you to make video games.
We've technically made games, though.
I have. Hey, Square's fun. All right. It's the same amount of fun that Frogger gives you.
Yeah, which is, it's a game.
If you think about how cutting edge Frogger was at one point,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty impressive. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, you're right. Frogger was impressive. Square is cool too. I'm just fucking around.
You're good. Should we do the intro now?
For what?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 103 of the Home Games Podcast, Idlelook. I am Yazeed, and this is Joseph.
Hello, I'm Joseph, and today's Thursday, March 10th, 2022. Today we're going to be talking about publishing. I have some ideas for a home games blog, which I wanted to kind of throw by you.
Okay.
You can hear the confidence in my voice when I say it, so you know I really mean it.
I know your writing style.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We'll talk about it. I also have like a rough timeline of everything that I want to do before launch. Mm-hmm. Kind of a cleaner version of this whiteboard behind us. And yeah, some thoughts on published games versus kind of shipped games that we make, kind of out of the box home games, us games. Mm-hmm. And then I had some thoughts on frame rate, game performance, and rendering, some real hardcore tech shit. We also have a Stream Deck finally set up, so...
Dale! Let's go, Dale.
Dale.mp3. Yeah, so I guess I'll start with what I've been working on. So basically, last time we talked, we had a pull request out that I put up with Squisher changes, or Squish.js changes that included the Squisher component that we used to have in Home Games Core, now in Squisher. I had another pull request out for Home Games Core to remove that Squisher that used to be there, and also some of that dashboard view stuff that I had been previously talking about, which was the kind of start of this most recent dashboard redesign. So basically, you had your pull request up for the Squisher changes. I merged that. I then went to Home Games Core, just merged my pull requests that I had before for the stuff that adapted to those changes. And now I'm working on a second one for you to be able to actually download games and play them in that new dashboard. And that stuff is going pretty well. I know I've said before that I was going to wait for you to review all of the code ever. But on that one, I was just like, well, there's more coming, and I don't want to, be blocked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was a good move, because the last 2 weeks have kicked my whole butt, so yeah, I don't blame you.
You and I both have jobs that require a lot from us outside of this whole thing, and it's really hard to manage this shit sometimes, so there's kind of the ideal what this thing should be or would be in a perfect world where maybe this was our full-time job and the way that things should be, but life kind of clashes with that sometimes. So anyway, merge the code without your approval. We'll see what you think after the fact, but it doesn't matter. It's already in there. And yeah, so then I kind of started going back to the other side of it, which is the publishing service. And I had kind of been dreading going back to it because I wrote that proof of concept demo version of game publishing and game downloading in June of last year. And in my head, the code was really bad. Mm-hmm. And so I was just thinking, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna take a whole weekend, and it's gonna be untangling bullshit and retangling new bullshit and all that kind of stuff. But long story short, it ended up being pretty easy. And at this moment, you can, on the new dashboard, go like localhost / game ID / version ID of a not public version, right? Like a version that someone has made and put up, but we have not yet reviewed, so it's not listed anywhere. But you can, if you know the ID, you go to / whatever, and then download and play the game, and it all works again, just like it did in that demo that I put up in June or whenever that was, August of last year. Which I guess is kind of me patting myself on the back, because that code I wrote was not as shitty as I thought it would have been. So anyway, I guess that's just the state of that. I'm still working on the next pull request and cleaning up all of that code, but I'm pleasantly surprised with the current state of home games and the state of publishing. And yeah, I guess I'll have that pull request for you in like a week or two, probably by the next episode, and see what you think. But once we have that, that's kind of that, and before polishing and kind of getting everything ready for beta.
And that pull request is only going to be touching core, yeah?
Yes. So it's going to be a pull request for Home Games Core, which will include some logic to look at that ID. So like if you go to localhost / ID, there's some code that's like, hey, do they have anything there? Is it a game ID? If it is, pass it along to the home game server. Home game server is like, okay, this looks like something, so I'll look at the catalog service or landlord for this version of this game, and then give you back the location of it, which is an S3, or it's a zip file in S3, and the zip file contains all the code, like an immutable version of that thing that someone published at that time. Like, this is the code for this version. This can never change. And so you download this bundle, unzip it locally. You get an index.js. You pass it along to the kind of main process, and it forks a new version of it on a new port and sends the player over to that port. So now they're playing that game.
Hey, nice.
Yeah, so that's basically what's going to be in there, as well as some, whatever other stuff we need in terms of the UI for that to make sense. And that kind of goes into what I was saying with games that are downloaded, games that are kind of provided by other people in the home games community, versus stuff that we kind of ship with home games. Like you download Home Games Core, there should be something like our Wii Sports should be in home game, our Square, like our flagship thing, to say like this is what this is before, otherwise it would just be people getting an empty dashboard and we're just like, fuck you, figure it out, download stuff. You kind of need something out of the box. And the way that those games are structured is just different from all of the publishing stuff. Like, for example, there are no versions. It's just, we have Git version control. That's versions of the code that ships with home games, but they're not kind of like deployed and published on a web server somewhere. So it's kind of just a different thing. And there's some different, I guess, like the way that data is structured is different in terms of displaying it on the dashboard and saying this is the author, this is when it was made, these are the versions of it. It just doesn't really exist with out of the box stuff. So yeah, I guess it's just one of the things that came up in that process.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah, I guess, do you have any thoughts on that before I go into the next thing?
I think I'll have to take a look at it, and then maybe I'll have some more thoughts on it. Because right now, I mean, it sounds like it's gonna be pretty nice, but
yeah, I guess that's the hard thing. There is not a great way. This is leading into my next thing. There is not a great way to get an idea of what has changed in practice, like the actual impact on the system after all the shit that we talk about. Like, we talk on this thing every 2 weeks, and there's a lot of progress that happens and a lot of code that gets written. But in terms of someone just listening to this, who I would imagine is just very, very surface level aware of what we're trying to build, it's all just intangible nothing to them. So I think it would be cool to have a blog, a written blog, and I'm not the best writer, whatever, but something that is condensed, digestible, at a glance, what we did and its impact on the thing. Maybe if it's technical, we can go in depth in that kind of thing in a way that we really can't in speech, just because sometimes you need to write things out when they're complicated.
Yeah.
Let me see what my little note here is: more than Twitter, less than a podcast. So on a tweet, I can say, for example, version whatever is out now. Includes dashboard downloads.
Mm-hmm.
On the podcast, we can say this was a real bitch to write, and it fucking sucks. And here's my journey with building this. But for the actual end user, they might not care about the podcast, and they might not get enough from the tweet. So then, just what changed? Here's a history list. Mm. And we've said it before, but instead of going to like minute 12 of the podcast to hear what this is about, it's like, here's a link.
Yeah.
Description.
Yeah. So like patch notes. It's full circle.
Yes. Patch notes. But maybe not even patch notes, because maybe something doesn't change. Maybe it's just our mindset changes on something, or our vision for something changes, and so we can make a blog post. It's just like, here's rethinking JavaScript. Not that we ever would, but it's an example. Or
we're switching to C++.
Maybe one day, I don't know.
Hopefully not. No, I don't like C.
Yeah, no, but if we did something like that, I guess it would be cool to have something on the blog to just kind of express that stuff in a more clean, cohesive way than just kind of us freeballing on the podcast. Yeah, I guess, what do you think about that?
I think the blog post should be written after the podcast, because that's when, if you did something, then I have time to like hear it, think about it, and then say it back to you and like ask you questions about it. And I imagine like the questions I ask might help with the writing of the blog post. Same vice versa, of course. So that would be my only thing on it. Because once you verbalized it once, you got to talk it through with somebody else. It's a lot easier than just like write it out.
Got it. So like the podcast is kind of like a draft of the blog?
Kind of.
Okay.
The podcast is like a long, windy road.
It's true. I also just removed my one ear thing, so I think I'll be better with the talking from this point.
Oh, so you don't hear yourself anymore?
Yeah, I don't hear myself. I just hear you.
Honestly, it doesn't bother me anymore.
Okay, well, you're an expert at podcasting, and I'm just struggling over
I'm an
here.
expert at ignoring my own voice.
Yeah, see, you just fucked up right there.
I did. I was doing so good. I do think the podcast would be a good idea. I do think the podcast is a good idea. I do think the blog would be a good idea, though, because somebody's not going to necessarily listen to like an hour of us rambling through stuff, and especially if like that hour of rambling isn't even about necessarily like what's happening now for them, but like something that's going to happen like, 2-4 weeks out,
Yeah.
So that'd be like my thing, because like the blog would probably come out around the same time, like here's the change that's like actually going to affect you, or like, hey, we talked about this on the podcast and we think we want to move in this direction. It's going to affect you in some amount of time whenever we get around to it. So yeah, especially when we have a public facing beta and people actually do have access to it, because at the moment people have access to it in the sense that they can check out our code and they can build it locally and kind of fuck around with it and see how see what's broken this week or whatever. But the vast majority of people aren't going to do that, especially someone who's just interested in playing games and stuff. So once we have something where we have kind of a solid base that we can give to people and just iterate on, when we kind of need a way to communicate stuff like that. And then, like, for example, say we run into a problem with the WebSocket library and the way that it handles something is slow or whatever, and we have a workaround to increase performance or something. That's one of those things where people share it
with other developers because that's useful information to them for their usage of that thing. That's not at all related to home games. You know, like, again, you could share the podcast and here's this part where they're talking about the WS library and their problem with it, but it's a lot less digestible than a blog post. Because I just know that's how people are, you know, like, here's how I sped up my SQL queries 100-fold or whatever, you know. That stuff, no one cares about what you did with it. They just care about taking the info for themselves.
Yeah. Also, it's a lot easier to control F in a blog post than to sift through a podcast.
Definitely.
Like, I need to know what's changing in this because my game uses it. Oh, control F on that blog post. Here it is. Instead of listening to a whole podcast and then maybe not even having us talk about it at all.
So that kind of begs the question then, and I don't mean this to be like, what's the point of the podcast?
People who are really committed.
Committed to
us, and also to really knowing what's happening in home games. Like, more committed to what's happening in home games.
I guess in a year from now, why is someone listening to this?
It's a good question. I don't know an answer for it.
I'm genuinely asking because we've talked about this before, but do we go for casual conversation and weave home games topics with in it? For example, this podcast, do we talk about Doom Eternal, something anybody can relate to? Oh, you play Doom Eternal, a video game? Well, let's tell you about how that relates to this thing that we make. You know, it's kind of like trying to bring them into our thing, or is this just the Joseph and Yazeed Power Hour?
No, the Joseph and Yazeed Power Hour is never an hour. It's just as long as we can go. But I think that it's probably, to me, okay, I don't ever read official patch notes because they're very boring and dry. But what I do is I watch other people read the patch notes because then they talk about it and they like joke about it and stuff like that. And it's much more digestible than to just read through 780, you know, updates to a game or whatever is happening. You know what I mean? And I think this podcast is kind of that, where we talk about like upcoming changes that are happening now, but also like changes that are going to be happening like well in the future that we need to talk about and figure out or work through. But then also it's not like we only talk about that, right? There's like other stuff going on where we talk about, you know, like Doom or whatever, things that are going on. You know, that we just kind of did it for fun or whatever, and then we try to like weave all of that together, and not necessarily like, oh, I played Doom and it made me think about home games. Like, Yazeed lost in Doom again. Isn't that funny? All right, back to the home game stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I that's to me what the podcast is for. It's like people who want to get the blog but don't have the attention to like, you know, read the blog and would rather just listen to us like talk about whatever, and also the blog basically.
That makes sense. Yeah, I don't really have a strong thing either way. I just like, and maybe it's because you and I both have had really fucking tough weeks, but when we do this, I kind of like the it's not work thing. And then sometimes it kind of feels like work when it's like, damn, I spent the weekend doing like, you know, kind of doing my job. And then at the end of a long day, I get to talk about the job I did. And I understand that there's value when people are using it. But at the moment, and maybe that's the thing, is because we don't really have that product yet, that there's no kind of feedback or there's nothing. We're kind of just like out into the void, and so sometimes it just feels like a job. And yeah, maybe it's my week that I'm just kind of thinking like that from. But
it might be. This is probably the only time. Honestly, that's more a statement about how lucky we've been. But I think this is the only time in the last 2 years where we've both gotten absolutely just beaten down over the last few weeks.
Yeah. At
the same time, I think because it's happened to us both, but the other one didn't have that, so it's like energy is low.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, I just wanted to ask that question just because, we've kind of changed the format of stuff every now and or a few times, and just thinking about what the content is like and that kind of stuff. But anyway, I kind of have a related thing. It's kind of what I was just saying, of taking something that someone might be aware of and then kind of relating it back to our stuff. But I've been watching this dude on YouTube lately, and his name is Carl Jobst, KarlJobst, and he covers speedrunning stuff, like the speedrunning community. And one of the big ones that he was talking about is GoldenEye. And there's still, I guess, a lot happening in that speedrun community, 30 years later. And I've heard this a lot in other games as well, but basically one of the tricks to speedrunning GoldenEye is to look down while you run places. And it's because on the Nintendo 64, which is, kind of not super great at running things fast, looking down gives you a better frame rate because you're not rendering all the stuff that's up here, right? Like whatever, they exist, but they're not on the screen, and so they don't have to actually be rendered, which we kind of have parallels to that in home games, kind of with my view stuff that I was talking about, right? Where you have stuff, but you have an actual view of it, which needs to be rendered on the screen. But basically the reason that works, and the reason the reason that's used in speedrunning is because the game speed is tied to the frame rate. So you literally walk faster if you're looking down because you're moving faster because there's less to whatever. And that's bad. Just as a general practice, it's bad for your frame rate and your game logic to be tied to the same thing. I think that's true for Bloodborne. I think that's true for at least a couple Need for Speed games. And every time it's mentioned, it's always kind of a negative thing of, I can't run this at 120 FPS because the game logic runs 4 times faster when I do that, and everything is fucked. And then I kind of realized that's fundamental to the design of home games. The frame rate is locked to the game logic. Kind of my maybe naive way of looking at the way that games work, or that they should work. When I originally did that, which is anytime something in the game updates, like the state of the game updates, it triggers a new event for every client to see, and then all of their screens update based on that new event. But I'm thinking now that might be a terrible idea. Or at least maybe it's an option for people to use in their game, but I think maybe we would need some other interface for a developer to say, this is my game logic and it updates on this frequency, and this is the render frequency, which is different from the game stuff. And the way that our Squish libraries work is, you can just publish a new version that has a new set of APIs, and the game can depend on that new version, and everything is still backwards compatible, right? That's been a conversation we've had a lot of times before. So, yeah, what do you think about that?
So, my initial thoughts was that I think it's okay for now. I do agree that we might want to be able to split the two. I think just initially when I'm thinking about it, the way I would want to split it is the developer picks the rate at which their logical rate. Render rate should be picked by the player. Because if they have an older device, maybe they only want to lock it to 30 FPS, 60 FPS. And then it can move it up. Think of a slider from probably 15 FPS up to maybe 120, 130. And that would be for the player to say I'm on a crappier computer, I want to render less frequently. Here we go. I'm on a super powerful computer, or my phone is a monster or whatever. Give me a stronger, a higher FPS. And basically it's an FPS lock, so it won't go above, it'll render up to that point basically. So the server will send it to them at that rate, but that requires the server to send it to players at a different beat, which is a lot to ask for. Or the server just always sends it and the client consumes it at the rate that it's supposed to consume it at. Because kind of like what you were saying with Nintendo, it's not like that stuff isn't there, but it doesn't need to be rendered every time. So like say somebody picked like 30 FPS and the server was firing at 120. Well, that means that they only need to render 1 out of every 4 frames, which is exactly what they would have gotten if the server was sending it in 30 FPS to them too. It might be better to do that too, because I wonder if, because how latency works, they're more likely to have the next frame that they're supposed to get than if the server was only sending it once every 30. You know what I mean?
They're more likely to have. I get. What do you mean by that?
So, if the server was sending out 30 FPS, right? That's fine, but there's a latency with when they get it. So when the server sends the 30th frame for that second, they might not get it in that second. They might get it in the next second. Whereas if we sent 120, but they only consume 30, well, we've already sent the next 4. And so they're more likely to have the frame that they're supposed to be rendering, if that makes sense, in that second.
Oh, you mean like when the actual client-side render cycle occurs, it's just what frame they're actually rendering at that time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that would always be the most recent one that they got, which would be all the WebSocket stuff is TCP, so we're like waiting for every client to get every packet before we kind of move on to the next thing. So it's kind of all locked in unison in that way, and ideally every client is getting that most recent frame, and then when they hit that render cycle, they just have that most recent frame. Yeah, I don't know. I think we just need to rethink what that stuff looks like, because there's the 3 components. And this is different from like a traditional game engine, I would think. I've never written a traditional game engine, and I have no knowledge of traditional game engines, for the record. But there's that game side logic update. There's the client side render update, and then there is this third thing, which is the latency for the client to actually receive the data it needs to show. Where I would guess on a regular thing, it would just be the time it takes for like the GPU to figure out whatever. I don't know anything. But
it's like time it over on the wire, and then time to render, time to paint, TTP and TTL. Yeah.
TTP. I don't. Yeah. Time to paint. That sounds real. I don't know. I don't know anything.
Making up terminology as we go.
Yeah, I don't know, but I think there's a lot of variables there, and even if you have a client that's really nice and can technically render however many frames a second, we're still limited by the network, and I think that would always be the bottleneck, because I just imagine that sending over large packets of data over the network would be more time consuming than rendering a single frame, especially as devices will keep getting faster and faster, but that latency will kind of stay relatively stagnant. Like, it's not like routers or, I don't know, maybe they are, but I imagine that there's always going to be kind of like a set number or set amount of latency between the kind of main game server and all of the devices it's talking to over that LAN. I just don't think that's improving much over time. But I could be wrong. I very much am all the time. So you look like you're pondering something, or are you just like scratching your lip?
No, I am.
Okay.
I had a realization. If we left tick rate the same, if we left all that the same, but we gave players the ability to set a consumption rate, like a render rate that's up to the tick rate, but not necessarily the tick rate. It's like, say like as a developer, I set the tick rate to, I don't know, 60, right? Let's say 10, right? Arbitrary number, 10, easy.
So your game updates 10 times a second?
Yeah.
Okay.
As a player, I can go up to 10, or I can go down to 0 or to 1, right?
So you choose to consume 1 out of every 10 frames?
Yes, but you still get all 10. Right, the server will send all 10, but will only paint for each player on the rate that they had chosen, if that makes sense. And what that means is we don't need to make any changes to the tick rate. We need to make a change to the client when it's painting via like a profile, like a setting, basically like an ENV or something like that for them. Okay, it's not. like an environment variable, but like something that they have the control over, and maybe like per game they have control over that too.
I guess it seems like something to optimize, because if we're just spending a significant amount of time on the game server sending out packets that we know are going to be ignored, it just seems like it would be more useful to have that client update thing in the actual interval of updates on the server to know Yazeed wants it every 10th, Joseph wants it every 5th, Synovia wants it every 30th, and I only send them every 30th, every 10th, or whatever, instead of sending out everything to everybody and waiting for me to blow out all these packets and then them to tell me that they got them. Even if it's very fast, it's still time.
Yeah, the only reason I disagree with that was I think that it would allow the players to do things they shouldn't be able to do.
Like what?
Because if their render rate is 1/10 if the server is sending them 1/10 the rate. Okay. let's take. I'm gonna drop my mic if I keep doing what I'm doing. Okay. Let's say like you're playing Square, right? As you're trying to move up, if you're getting 1/10 the frame rate, the like enemy blocks that are moving across, it's harder to know whether you can jump into that space or not, because the server is still ticking at its rate. But if you always got all of that data, it's kind of like what you were saying about the N64, where when you're looking down, it's not like those under things aren't there. It's just that you don't render it. So you should still know that if you jump forward, you would die in Square, for example, or like you can't move past the certain wall or something like that, like a moving wall or something. You know what I mean?
If it's not on the screen, how would you know?
Because for the server it's there, but for the player it isn't there. But right, basically, there's like a certain lag between what the server has and what the player would see visually, and I think that's shit. But that's kind of like what we're talking about. It'd be like the fighting game problem where you have like lost frames and stuff like that. How you solve that? Again,
I guess so. Like the 007 thing, right? Like enemies off screen shooting at you, and because you're not looking at them, they're not on your screen, but they're there. That is tick rate. That is on the game's server side. Like that is on the server side. The game knows, this square is right here. This player cannot move because this square is right here, or if they do, they'll die. That's just like the source of truth. That is the state of the game. If the player chooses to only see one every 10th frame, like they're basically just running the parallel would be like running a modern game on shitty hardware. The game is happening, you're getting a really bad view of it because your hardware sucks. And you wouldn't know the state of the game unless you had hardware that was able to keep up with it. And the requirement's pretty low here. It's just, can you like render shit on a canvas in a browser,
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think it just requires thought. It's like a pretty technical thing. And I think it's kind of a perfect candidate for blog posts. Here's how we solved this. We have an interesting problem here with latency involved in a classic tick rate versus render update. You know what I mean? Like you can kind of do that, and make it kind of tell an interesting story from it in a way that we really can't kind of freestyling off the top, which is what this is. So I don't know. I think we'll have to think about it, but I do think it's interesting. I was just thinking about it, especially because seeing GoldenEye. Just kind of realizing like this has been a problem, and it's still a problem. People still make games like this. Yeah. So maybe it's not really that big of a. I don't know. We'll think about it.
I don't think it's the end of the world. I'll say that. Period.
I'm trying to get more usage out of this thing. I spent like 2 hours trying to set up the Stream Deck today. Also, isn't it super shitty? There's a product called a Stream Deck, and there's a product called a Steam Deck.
It's really weird marketing. I will say that.
For Valve?
Well, not marketing. It's like a weird thing. It's like if somebody named their website like goggle.com. Because it's like somebody like mistyped Google, they'll end up there. And it's like, yeah, they'll end up there, but they'll be like, this is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I guess it's just confusing because even me, like a tech person, I confuse the names all the time. And I just imagine, like, for regular people, it's a pain in the ass to keep those things straight because they're very different products. You know, getting little Timmy a Stream Deck for Christmas. Just like, fuck you, Grandma.
He gets you a Steam Deck, and you're just like, oh, well,
Yeah.
I don't own Steam games, so it's big sad.
Yeah.
Poor little Timmy. You ever think about... oh, you didn't take this class. Back in college, I took a class called Comparative Programming Languages, and we were going over one specifically called Haskell.
Mm-hmm.
The professor was saying that, like there's like a really famous I don't know if it's like a philosopher, but like a thinker about software and like coding languages, and they're saying like the number one mistake people make is typing in coding, but not like typing, but like typing like TypeScript types or Java has types on their stuff. But I don't think that's true. I think it's just typing. I think mechanically people make mistakes more often than anything else, and then they don't realize it, and they're like 7 days down the line, they're like, what the fuck?
You're saying that you think this philosopher said typing and people interpreted it the wrong way?
No, I think the philosopher is wrong.
Oh.
Because he was like, typing's the number one problem with a programming language. I don't agree with that at all. I think it's just typing. People mess up. Any language is going to have that problem where the user's inputting information.
See, I saw a post recently about someone was saying that JavaScript is the worst language to begin programming with because it's so loose with things, and you can just do numbers and strings. Like, you can add a number to a string and all that kind of stuff. To be fair, you can in Java as well. I can do, string plus number, and it'll convert the number to a string kind of implicitly. But I super disagree. I think typing is just confusing, and I think unless you know what you're doing, maybe it's kind of a double-sided thing, because if you know what you're doing, you're not making type errors. But anyway, I think the idea of typing things in order to kind of safeguard or to kind of have consistency makes sense. But when you're actually just building stuff and you are very comfortable with what you're doing, all that other stuff gets in the way. It's like, I know what this is. I'm going to do what I need to do, and I don't need to tell you what this is, computer. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, dude, I hate languages that I'm required to, like, this is an int, this is a string. Yeah. I love JavaScript because it's just like, here's a value. It can be whatever. In fact, I'm going to change it right now. And then there you go. And it just works. I liked in Ruby, I think it was Ruby, there's like a concept called like duck typing, which is it called duck typing? I'm going to say it's duck typing. Sure. Basically, it's like writing a function so that it can take in things of multiple types and still like output values correctly. So like getting in like a number and giving you back a number when you add them together, or taking in two strings and like concatenating them together and giving them together, and just being able to like do that with any type. I love that shit. I hate in Java where it's like you sent a number and I was expecting a string. I'm non-functional now. It's like, oh, dope. That's sick.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess for someone learning, it might be useful in the long run or more beneficial in the long run to have a strongly typed language like Java or whatever to learn, because you understand the fundamentals of how all this data is stored and why things are typed in the first place, and the kind of fundamental nature of bits and shit like that. But if you're just trying to, let's say, make a home game, and you just want to get in there and
Dale!
You just want to get in there and go.
You said earlier different was your favorite. That I know that one's your favorite.
Dale is useful, but my actual favorite.
That's the sound of a home run.
But I kind of want to end every episode with that one. But unless the episode is not a home run, like we could feel it before it's over, it's like, oh, we kind of hit him with the that's enough, whatever. We have a whole bunch of these. We'll workshop them. I have like 49 audio clips that I can add onto this thing, and I only have 15 at the moment on here, so we'll figure it out.
We need 2 more Steam Decks. Jesus.
Were you gonna say something?
No, I agree, but it does bring up. So I don't know when you were gonna get to this, but TypeScript.
Yeah, TypeScript. So basically, the timeline for what we're doing before launch Like I said earlier, I'm working on the pull request for downloading published games. At the moment, you can publish a game. I also was thinking about integrating our homegames.io website with GitHub instead of needing to paste the commit ID into our form and saying like where on GitHub your code is. It's just log in with GitHub. But that's a lot of work, and I don't want to do it before launch, so that's a one-day thing, but I do think it'd be cool.
What do you mean?
Like, you go to homegames.io, you have an account, you log in, you say, here's my GitHub account, like, click a sign in with GitHub button, and then on our website, we load from your GitHub data, your repos, and there's like a publish button next to it. Like, you click into your repo of your game that you're building. It shows you the commit history. Next to the commit is a publish for thing. Because at the moment, our publish flow is what's your GitHub username, what's your GitHub repo, and what's the commit. And it needs to be public. So we just take those things and we go to github.com/yourname/repo/commit and just pull something from it. And I think from a user experience perspective, it would make more sense to integrate with GitHub. And it would also kind of remove that thing of anybody can submit a publish request for anything on GitHub. And at the moment, when someone publishes something, we send an email to the GitHub repo owner and say, hey, did you approve this? Click here. We can kind of remove that stuff if we integrate with GitHub, but it's something that we definitely don't need to do anytime soon. I was just thinking it'd be cool, but anyway, timeline for stuff.
Wait, can we, before we move on to that?
Yeah.
I do like that, but doesn't that raise a problem where we need to have read access to every repo so they can go through and pick which one they're talking about?
Yeah, I guess my assumption is that everything is public in the first place, but obviously we don't care about anything private, and we would disallow them to use anything private. I'm pretty sure you can scope the permissions to just read public stuff and not read private things, and someone can like authorize that you only have those permissions when you call the API. So you literally cannot access their private things. But that's something we'll have to look into. I don't actually know if that's the case, but I would imagine they have scoped permissions like that. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of just a loose idea.
It'd be neat. It'd be nice from a UI standpoint, and a nice user experience. That's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
I do think I wouldn't use that feature though.
You would not?
No, I would probably always just use that. I'm like a savage sometimes where I'll just be like, nah, this requires personal information. No, I'll do it manually instead.
Yeah, I guess I don't see it as personal information, because if it's like you're a developer and you have a GitHub account, we only support GitHub at the moment. I'm sure there's other, we can do like GitLab or whatever. But if you're publishing things, and if you're publishing a game, you're probably publishing multiple versions of it. You're kind of iterating through, and I would hope that if you're publishing one game, you kind of publish multiple. And if you're doing that, it seems reasonable to have the place that your code lives integrated with the place where we take your code from, especially if we can limit it to just public stuff, and you can kind of give us access to only what we want and care about, which is the public stuff anyway. Anyway, whatever. We'll think about it. We'll workshop it.
Okay. That works.
But yeah, so the timeline for stuff. Basically, pull request for downloading published games. I'll have that up in the next couple weeks. Once I do that, we'll have kind of a workable version of every Home Games thing that we have, and then Yazeed will do TypeScript stuff for Home Games Core and Squish, and maybe Home Games Web. We'll see. And then while you're doing that, Yazeed, I will work on the admin dashboard that I was talking about last episode, where basically when people publish games and they get into the state I was saying before, where you can access it just by ID directly, like if your friend sends you the ID of the game they just published, we have something on our end, which is the actual review process to make it listed in our catalog. So like make it public and say, okay, there's no copyrighted shit in this, there's no illegal shit in this, this is not a virus. We're kind of stamping this. And that's what this admin dashboard is going to let us do, where we can see all these requests and approve and deny people like that. That kind of goes hand in hand with the catalog stuff, because the catalog is where things end up when they're approved in the admin dashboard. And like I've said before, the catalog is kind of in a rough, good state right now. Like it needs styling and that kind of shit, but the data's there. Yeah, and then I'm kind of just working on polishing stuff while you're TypeScriptifying everything. So I'm adding podcasts on the website, with the download links and all that kind of stuff, so you don't get Joe Rogan. And Pico de Gallo, our demo website, has been down for a while. Don't know why, but I can guess. My shitty code.
Don't know why this man says.
So we need a version of Pico de Gallo, but it would need to be kind of like a sandbox version that wouldn't allow you to download games, because someone could theoretically, make a game that does something malicious. They know how to get around Home Dome, which is our publishing approval tester thing. And if they know how to get around that, and then they can kind of get this malicious code and then access Pico de Gallo / their game ID and then bring down our shit. So we kind of need to make it so they couldn't download things. We would only have the out of the box stuff that I was saying before. Games available in Pico de Gallo. Also, just to disincentivize, is that a word? De-incentivize? I don't know. To not make people want to be on Pico de Gallo permanently. Like, if you want to play games with your friends, don't use Pico de Gallo. It's a demo. So, yeah, I think it should just be like a quick glance at what we have to offer and how things kind of generally work. And I'll bring that back at some point. Once I finish doing that, going and just, again, kind of hopefully TypeScript stuff is done, and I can just go and polish everything and fix bugs that we find, because there are plenty. None of them are huge at the moment, but we just have a lot of them. Little small visual bugs, or just in certain games that we have in that out of the box collection are just super fucked at the moment, so we should fix those and that kind of stuff. And basically at that point it should be July ish. And when that happens, we hit the big red button,
Dale!
and we go.
Oh yeah, brother. Shit, I actually had something to think about, and then the Dale hit me, and I was laughing, and I forgot now.
Oh, I want Mike's hot honey.
Oh.
I want Mike's hot honey sounds.
Yeah.
I don't know why I put that on here. She said that not even like trying to record an audio clip. She just said it because we were ordering on DoorDash. And I just think it's really good to be on here.
That is so incredibly out of context. In this.
Oh, yeah.
Shit. What was I saying? What were the last three things you said?
I said we're going to bring Pico de Gallo back.
Oh, do you remember Fusion Frenzy?
I do.
Do you remember how, the game would die, in the demo?
No.
I never bought Fusion Frenzy, so I used to just play it. Remember, on the old Xbox, where it'd be here's, demo games that came along with it?
Mm-hmm.
I'd only play Fusion Frenzy through there. And so, in Fusion Frenzy, the demo version, you get, 20 minutes of play, and then it would just be hopefully you liked it, try again. Maybe we should do versions of the, pre-built games that kind of do that.
They have a self-destruct button or a timer on it.
Probably not a timer, but some cutoff point where if you liked what's going on, you would have gotten to this point. If you didn't like what's going on, then you left already.
You mean just a stripped back version?
Yeah,
demo version?
on Square, right? There's 9 levels. It's on level 4, at the end of level 4, right? It's just if you liked it, download home games. Click the link here to go do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like we would have to go and kind of create the limitations in every game and kind of say when is this too much fun, and it seems like more work, I guess. But I do like the idea of kind of restricting it, just because, like I said, I don't want someone to go to Pico de Gallo when they're already comfortable with home games and they know what it is. It should just be what the fuck is this? I think the concept is foreign to people. I've been thinking about this stuff because I've been working on this for almost 4 years. I started really, really going for it June, maybe April 2018, and then you and I started going, you kind of started working on it 2019. So it's just been a lot of time kind of just sitting in my head thinking about what this is that we're building, and we really didn't know in the beginning what we were building, but I kind of have a very clear idea now what this is. And so Pico de Gallo is super important to just show people what it is from the going to the website to kind of knowing what we're doing. But it's not home games. Like, it's not the thing to play. It's not whatever. So we do need limitations there for sure. Yeah.
Fusion Frenzy.
Yeah. Very, just like many things in my life, very inspired by Fusion Frenzy. I hear that's Bill Gates' favorite game. I remember he said that was his favorite game on the Xbox was Fusion Frenzy.
That makes sense. It's got everything a game should have. Friends, competition, silly games.
Yeah.
Like it's basically like all of the fun mini games from like Mario Party in a game that doesn't have any of the like board game part of it. It's just like you play the mini games.
Yeah. I only remember you're just like running around in a ball.
Yeah, and you like do something.
Yeah, real fun. Just to do something in a ball.
The one I remember is you're going up like a tower, and then there's like chest high electrical barriers and then like feet high electrical barriers, and you gotta duck under the chest high ones and then jump over the ones, and then there's like lava or something that's like climbing the tower with you, and so you have to like keep going, and every time you messed up you got closer and closer to the lava. My brother was very bad at that game, that's why it was my favorite one. I beat my brother like 100 times out of 100 times on that one.
Nice.
I don't even think that one finished. That would be like the last one, and then it'd be like, if you like Fusion Frenzy, buy your local GameStop or whatever.
Is the ultimate lesson here that you never bought Fusion Frenzy? So no one will ever play
I never
home
bought
games?
Fusion Frenzy because I had zero income.
Oh, yeah.
I was like 8. How much money does an 8-year-old have? And also I'd have to convince my mom to be like, take me to the video game store to buy Fusion Frenzy.
That's true. It's true. Luckily, our thing is free.
Yeah.
And even if we had any sort of a price tag on it, we'd keep those prices low because...
I'm a wild man when it comes to cutting prices.
Yeah, buddy. Let's go. But yeah, also it's a lot easier now because you don't have to go anywhere to get home games. Before, for Fusion Frenzy, you actually had to get somebody to drive you, or if you were close enough, you could walk to the nearest like video game store.
It's true. We also have to sign our binaries at some point. The downloads that we release, your OS will tell you it's a virus unless we pay money to say that this is us, and then we sign our code with like a signature or whatever the fuck. I don't know how anything works in computers, but we do something. We have to pay money to like say to some authority that we're people that have a name. We sign our code with this thing, and then we release it. When you download it on Windows and Mac, it's like, hey, this is made by Joseph and Yazeed.
Nice.
Instead of, this is made by some fucker who's gonna, definitely gonna give you a virus. Yeah.
What's funny? That there's a lot of really garbo games that I wouldn't have imagined that they are signed like that, but they are indeed signed like that.
I guess if everything is released through Steam, it's kind of different, right? I don't really know how anything works. I know that we're providing the binary ourselves through us, as opposed to Valve giving you something and then people publish to their store.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know anything about anything.
I don't know anything about Valve either.
I also feel like shit because my energy has been low as fuck this whole episode because I'm inches from death. Anyway, that's about all I had for notes and stuff. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, just really briefly. I talked to one of my other friends who...
You have other friends? What? You're not allowed. You have to be my only friend who do this podcast with me. I thought this was just the two of us, Yazeed.
I really... I've been trying to use the phrase "my other friends" because I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, my friend," and then to me it makes it feel like this isn't a friendship if you say that. So I try to say like my other friend, even if the other person I'm talking to isn't somebody I consider a friend.
Okay, that's kind of a. I very intentionally don't call people my friends if they're not my friends.
Oh,
yeah.
it's easier for me to not want to hurt people's feelings. If they consider me their friend and I'm just like, oh, my friend, but then when my actually like imagine somebody who I wasn't friends with was there and I was like, oh, this is my friend Joseph. And I was like, and Joseph, this is like person.
There was an episode of Abbott Elementary that I watched recently where they talked about work friends. Like you have people that you're just friends with at work. And I didn't believe in that. But my like 2 jobs ago, I had people that I would like hang out with often. Literally never spoke to them again after I quit. So like sometimes people aren't your friends and that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay, but I don't know what they consider me. Because I've been in a situation before where somebody considered me their close friend, and I was like, I'm just here. But anyway.
Have you seen the sex buttons for couples? Where it's like there's a secret button by your bed, and then you hit the button if you want sex?
No.
It's, you know how the idea of Tinder is like we both have to like each other before we start talking, so we both know we like each other?
Yeah.
But if you don't like me and I like you, you don't even know it?
Yeah.
It's basically that idea for couples. So it's like a button on your side and a button on my side. I hit the sex button. If you hit the sex button, then it's like, hey, it's time for, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So there should be a friendship thing where it's like, I think you're my really good friend. And the other person is just like, I only talk to you because you're close to me physically. And then so it's like, okay, I know that you don't see me like that, you know, to avoid the awkward confrontation.
I like the ambiguity. I feel like it's easier to not hurt somebody's feelings. Because if someone's like, you're like a really close friend of mine, you know, I feel like I could share everything with you, and you're just like, all right, like, I'm browsing Twitter while you're telling me all this stuff. Like,
yeah, that's true. I've had work friends that told me a lot of information about themselves, and I feel close to them, even though I am not their anyway.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But anyway, I was talking to my other friend who builds quite a few projects, and I was asking them about like what ESLint rule set not ESLint, but like any linter that they recommended, and the recommendation was just straight up to take ESLint's basic ESLinter rules. They did say that if it's for a project in progress, it's very time consuming because you have to go through and fix all these linting errors. But I think that's kind of what we want to do. They did say the other option is to just start with your linter having no rules and then you add rules, but that sounds like a lot of tedious work and also like going through a linting document there, and I don't want to read any more documentation than I already do professionally.
Yeah, I know for a time, because we do have an ESLint config in Home Games Core and I think Home Games Web, and for a time I was abiding by that and kind of making sure I was running the script before I committed stuff. But then we were just talking before the podcast, it's like there's some things that you only talk about when the work isn't urgent, and I don't know. I'm not realizing I'm in like a weird space mentally, just because I need like a win. You know what I mean? So I'm just like trying to rush towards this finish line of the project. Not rush, but I'm trying to get to the finish line of the project. So anyway, somewhere along the way, I was like, well, fuck the linter. This works. You know, I don't care if it's sloppy. Fuck you, Yazeed. But so what I'm saying is there's like a half step. I was linting things for a while, and then it started to go south, but it wasn't like, it's not just in total disarray, you know?
Yeah. That is one thing. It's for the most part, your code looks similar to all other code that you've written. Like, it's not like you're using tabs and spaces interchangeably.
Yeah. I still don't get that. We talked about it before, but I still don't get how that's
we talked about that on episode 0.
Yeah, we did. Oh yeah, that's like tabs or spaces.
Yeah. I don't know why I remember that, but I don't remember college.
Just all of college.
It's probably like 99% of college I don't remember anymore.
Yeah.
And like almost 100% of high school I don't remember anymore. But at any rate, that like your code looks similar to the other code. It's not like super jank or anything like that. I do think that just as we go into beta, it's probably a good idea to have a linter because other people at that point would be looking at the code more, especially for like the games that we make. Those should be probably have like a linter and TypeScripted too, so people can see like how typing works. But
yeah, I should add that to this list. I'm looking at the whiteboard here. So in red is everything that we need for launch, and that's Squish versions, which we have right now. Home Games Link, which it works, but I just need to make sure it's solid and kind of test it. Publishing, which I've talked about. Catalog, which I've talked about. Admin dashboard. Final Home Games dashboard, and that's final, kind of, wink wink, because it's never final. But then in black, I have things that we really should have before launch, and that's what I would add. Oh, really should have before launch, but isn't really required.
Yeah.
So I would add linting to that. And legal stuff, podcast on website, and controller support. That's just like a personal thing, just because I don't think video games are real unless you can play them with a controller. I will die on that hill. I don't care.
And that's fine. I can't use a controller. I gave Joseph credit for being like your code looks similar to all your other code. His handwriting, that's not the case. He has the word legal on there, and it looks like, wow, somebody really wrote that nicely. And then right next to it is the word stuff, and it is scuffed. It is scuffed, super scuffed. And across from it, it's not even like on a straight line. It's like a line of like revisit walkie-talkie. But like, I don't know if you can see that on there, but he has legal on there, and legal is like super clean.
I think they can see it if they kind of zoom in on the video. But basically that whole board was written in 3 different mental states. The left side was like, I just need to brain dump everything, and that's why it's kind of just very all over the place. And you could tell because I'm kind of tall, so as it goes lower, my writing gets shittier because I'm like, like really struggling and like maintaining balance to go that low. Yeah, so it's all over the place, just like everything else I do.
Except it's at the same level as legal. Unless you sat down to write legal.
That's my secret. I literally got on my knees to write the lower half of that list right there. A little inside baseball for you.
That's the sound of a home run.
Because I said baseball. Sorry, I won't use that much. I just want to introduce
funny.
it.
It's just funny.
One thing I have in there too. This is like my actual plan for. I had mentioned a few episodes ago that I wanted to do video content where I basically just build something from the start, and I kind of treat the camera like my rubber duck, and then edit things that are interesting. So I take like hours of footage and I cut it down to like 30 minutes or whatever. So I want to build an achievement service, like. Sometime in the future, I want to build an achievement service, and I think people without interest in home games can have an interest in how that works on a technical level, because everybody loves achievements, or they should. So I'm going to build that at some point in the future. I think it'd be cool, but then that kind of goes into this whole discussion of what's an achievement in home games and how do people view it, and what's the social aspect, and blah blah blah. Planning, product development, business, technology.
Mr. Worldwide.
That's going to do it for us. Thank you, everybody, for listening. As always, our music is done by our friend Tynan. He is Nytan on Bandcamp. That is Nytan, Nytan. You can find us on Twitter at homegames.io. We also have a website, homegames.io. You can find, or you can send us a message using the contact form at the bottom of the page. Send us questions, concerns, feedback, anything you like.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.